Everyone, my name is Christina, and I'm an integration specialist here at RedTeam. Today, we'll be providing a basic overview of what the RedTeam Flex integration to Sage Intacct looks like and how it works. The Sage Intacct integration is a cloud service designed to connect with different software. With that, when we're getting ready to connect to the Sage Intacct, we must first build out a web user ID within Intacct. And in order for the Sage Intacct, we must first build out that web user ID within Intacct for RedTeam to communicate, along with some transaction details and custom fields. We will work with the user to create this, but once we have completed this, that's when we have the access to this app cart and where our integration to the Sage Intacct begins. And our RedTeam configuration team will help build that database and make sure everything gets connected properly. And so in this configuration area, there is this import tool that with this import tool, it allows you to import a whole bunch of items that RedTeam will assist with. Example, there are cost codes, vendor types, job cost types, and these are very important to get connected properly. So, of course, the RedTeam configuration and implementation team will help assist in doing all of that, so that we can push transactions through and receive them on either side of the software. So when setting up cost codes, the initial cost codes will be imported with the configuration team, but at times you may have an additional cost code or vendor that is needs to be brought in after the fact. It's brand new, you need to make sure it's linked up. So you would go into this cost code area, and it'll load in just a moment, but you would click on the cost code that you're bringing in, and you would associate it with a division. So like this one here for the pools and spa, when we click on the cost code, we would then see this cost division show up, and we would associate it with the cost code that we would like, and then we would click import. This would create it within the RedTeam side. Now, sometimes we have a cost code that is in both sides, and we need to make sure that those are linked up, such as this 1330 survey layout data. This has 1330, so at that point, they would be connected. Again, we would just click on the code, and we would hit import, and we would make sure that those are linked up. Here is one here that, again, we would ensure that we would click on the cost code and import and make sure all of that is taken care of. As I said, it is very important that the cost codes as well as the vendors are linked up. So once we have those initial configurations set up, the RedTeam will assist with also setting up your control accounts, and that connects to your general ledger. We'll also set up your payment terms and help you link those, as well as your tax venues, company divisions, and your company credit cards. Your expense codes, all of these items will be assisted in the initial configuration, so that really this becomes more of a maintenance tool in this configuration rather than coming in here every single day. Now, one item we do want to point out is the preferences. And on the preferences, you will be able to see that we automatically default the US dollar as your transaction for currency. And that is just automatic for you. Additionally, there's this tool that if you choose to utilize it, it has a minimum accounting date. And this is so that older invoices and items that come in that are older and in a period that may be closed in your Sage Intacct, they will be sent as this date. Typically, we see this at year end, but it can be on a monthly basis as well. The other item is may create vendor payment in committed status. And we default this because at that point, all your payments from vendor as well as your owner billing will come back into RedTeam as a committed status rather than a draft status. And we'll get more into that as we go into RedTeam, but this eliminates a second step that you need to do inside RedTeam. Job costs, they will be brought in as part of a sweep, and we will discuss that a little bit further within RedTeam as well. Now, there are some other little tools here that are nice to review every once in a while. When you have a new project or whatever, you want to make sure it got linked over. This kind of summarizes your information so that you can see this inside this area that you can say, yes, it did link over. We also have the transaction log that provides your most recent transactions. And when you hit the filter, the little funnel we call it, you can see that you have a couple of different ways you can filter and sort this data. And you can filter based on status, the source, and then a date range. And you can see that these have been successful. This one wasn't as successful, and it's because the employee is inactive inside Sage. So this helps provide you some information. So that basically covers the overview of the configuration. Again, it's very important that this part is set up properly, and our configuration team will assist you with all of that. Now we will move into the RedTeam and more of the day-to-day interactions and what you're actually going to be doing on a typical day. One of the first aspects of the Sage Intacct integration is that it is pretty deliberate in terms of which projects you have to link up. We don't automatically link these up. And so you would have to come in here. And as you can see, I'm on the project overview here, and you can see that we have sent these projects here over to Sage, and they have the chain link that's grayish black that reflects that they have been moved over and that they are linked. Now you can see this yellow broken chain link, and that means that this one has not been pushed over, and that we can actually come into this project then, and we can utilize the scope tab here. And if we click the edit, as long as this is in the scope not closed stage, we can see that once we go to edit, you can put your project ID that's inside Sage, so that based on that format. And you can then, when you're ready, the project has been totally set up, you can click send to Sage Intacct, and it will push over. Now, if you choose not to push that, you don't have a project inside Sage Intacct as of yet, it will push this ID, project ID, over to have a project over there that transactions can kind of be linked to, but it's only going to push the basic information framework, such as the ID, project ID, the name, and the address. Now, once the project is linked up right here, let's go into the project overview again, and let me show you one that has been linked so that you can see what that looks like. And we're going to go into this new project here. And once we go into the scope and the edit, you will be able to see that this project has been sent over to Intacct, and you can see by whom and what date. So that's always a helpful tool should something, a question be asked as to who sent this over or wasn't ready or whatever. There are other options and things that we push over, for example, one of the things that RedTeam sends into Sage right off the bat is your buyouts and commitments for vendor commitments, and whether it's a subcontract or a purchase order. It's very much designed to be event driven, and it's designed to be part of the normal workflow of the RedTeam. So the way these commitments are handled, whether I have them in Sage and not in RedTeam, it's basically the same process where they would get entered into whichever software, and typically the RedTeam, and they start out in a draft status. And when we kind of click here, you will see that there are some options, and then it gets committed, and then it goes to execute. So that being said, you can see where these two here have been executed and sent over to Intacct. And these are just in the commitment stage as of yet this point. And once it's approved and you get your final everything, it gets sent. You can then look at the metadata log, and you can see again who has sent it over, who created it, and all the kind of audit trail that you need for that transaction. So that execution actually is the trigger point to send it, and it's going to send it out with all the details of this vendor invoice and or subcontract or purchase order. And as you enter those invoices, then the vendors they start and they go over there, and once you have them over there, then you can see them underneath the invoices. So we'll go over to the invoice area and push over and let you see how the material invoices and those items move over. Once we move these over, you can see that we again have this Sage Intacct column, that we have one that's linked and this one is unlinked. And once these invoices move over to Sage Intacct, at some point, those invoices will be paid. And where we had in the configuration where we would send over the default for the payments to come back as a committed, we did this one before it was defaulted. So this came over as draft, which requires a second step. But if now that we've got that committed over in the configuration area, the new payments that will come in over as committed. It does provide you the time and the date of the payment. And that is a benefit for your project managers when they're looking to see, hey, a sub says I haven't been paid, and that provides a lot of information for your project managers, and possibly not having the accounting department be contacted so much for information that's right here. Additionally, we have in the billing section that you can now send your progress billing out to your project owner. And you can see here, again, we have where we have some that have moved over, and the blue means that it's already been processed, and we've actually received payments here. When you receive the payments, it does relieve your AP invoices and other related reports. And on this side, it would relieve your aging report. And on this one, it has not been sent over. So we're going to take a look at this one. And you will be able to see that there is each line item that encompasses all the invoices and the subcontract billings and the commitments that have been brought in. And so you can see all of what makes up that progress billing to that owner. Then once you commit that and send it over, then it will be inside the Sage Intacct. And once payment is received, you will see the payment here. Now, at this point, there is this transaction tab here, that we do have additional filtering options for you. And once you click on the filter area, you can see that you still have the current date range that you can choose whichever date range you need. You have transaction types. So if you wanted to look at employee expenses, so forth. But the biggest thing that we see here is that your job costs, and where I had mentioned that we would touch back on the job costs, those job costs come in via sweep, and you can see your adjusting entries by clicking this little hamburger and manage adjusting entries. And you will be able to see your adjusting entries that have moved over, whether they are payroll items, employee expenses, those sorts of items. Those types of invoices will move over those expenses. And you can see that the source was your Sage Intacct, and they've been linked. They've moved over from your Sage Intacct, which also brings me back to, if you go back into that project that is linked, we will go back in here. And if you go into the budget tab, you will see where the actual costs do come in. Those are your job costs. They filter back over. We pull them in from the RedTeam. RedTeam pulls them in from Sage Intacct, and those items, once you click on this, you can see these were vendor invoices that make up this cost code. And you can then see that this was an adjusting entry, that the employee expense, it was a disbursement, we had to pay it. It came in from Sage Intacct. And so that is your adjusting entry. And that's where under the transactions, you can see all your adjusting entries. But for the project manager, this is a great tool for them to see what's making up those lines, what has moved in, what has been received in expenses, and those sorts of things. And that basically kind of gives you an overview. And just to kind of summarize that, the situation as far as the total piece is that from the start, we kind of create a web entity ID, and get you connected into Sage Intacct. We help you configure everything out inside the configuration area, and then we ensure that things are moving back and forth as the way you want to see them, that they're moving easily and properly into the right cost codes, and there aren't any issues. Then we have where you commit a project. Once you create that project and you can link it over to Sage Intacct, and then the commitments and the invoices and purchase orders are all starting to be created. All of that happens with your daily workflow. And then once you start having all of that, you create an owner billing and send that out, and payments are then received just as you create payments with the accounts payable. And with that, I think we have a question. Lucas?
Just one other addition on there is employee expenses being exported from RedTeam to Intacct.
What was the question? I'm sorry. Did you have something else that you wanted?
Employee expenses being
yes,
sent from RedTeam to Intacct.
Thank you, Lucas. One of the things we can also push are the employee expenses, and I did not get to that. But when you come in, you can enter your employee expenses. We push them back and forth. And so if an individual has gone and purchased some gas, they can enter those expenses. Once they go through the approval process committed, that can be sent to Sage. And then at that point, we can then, if it's entered into Sage, it will push in as an adjusting entry if that is an expense. but we do push those. And did I cover everything on that, Lucas?
Yeah, that should be it. Just a brief little thing that we send that out if they make use of expenses in RedTeam once they're approved.
Yes. And I forgot to mention that. So I'm not sure if there are any questions. One of the last things we wanted to point out is that there's this little bubble here that you can always connect to our service team, as well as there are document information in there. Once you type in a subject, I forgot about how to create a purchase order or whatever, that can be also provided, lots of documents in there to help you refresh your memory. So with that, we hope this has been beneficial, and thank you for attending.